In this video, I'm going to show you just how big of a difference phase aligning your drums can make. Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Andrew, and we're just going to jump in and talk about what phase even really is. So as I'm sure you know, sound is a wave. So if you have a single sine wave and put it in a DAW and zoom in quite a bit, you can actually see the up and down of the individual wave happening. So that's what we have here. This is just a sine wave, and we just have it duplicated. When you look at the actual wave, you can see it's going up and then down, and that is basically, this part is when the speaker cone is pushing out, and then the down is it being pulled back in. So we're just gonna take one of these and play it and take a listen, and it's just gonna be a 250 hertz tone. And now if we solo another, because they're in phase, it should get louder. It did. In fact, it got exactly 6 dB louder, because that is what perfect summation does. It's up to 6 dB. All right, now we're just gonna take that second layer and shift it over. So if we take this and grab it and pull it basically so it's right in line with the other ones down, the second one goes up. It's basically, I mean, think about it. The cone is being pushed out, but it's also being pulled back the same amount. That would just cancel out. And so let's take a listen with this now. See how much quieter that is? So what, it was 13.2 with just one. It's negative 33 right here. And clearly that's just because I don't have them perfectly lined up. If you had them perfectly lined up, they would actually completely cancel. So at least theoretically, two things that are identical that are slightly out of time with each other can completely cancel and end up basically muting. Now look, in the real world, you're never gonna get full mute, but especially on the lower frequencies, that type of cancellation can happen like crazy when you have multiple mics on any sort of input, specifically things like drums. So long story short, this is really important stuff. The way that I like to get around it is with a plugin called Auto Align. So this plugin, you basically put an instance on every single drum track and have it listen for about 30 seconds, and then it will try to get all of them in phase as much as possible. As you can see, I have all the different drum inputs here, and they have different amounts of time either taken away or added to them to try to get them to all line up, so that when that snare drum is hit, so notice I have the snare drum set at 0, so I've made that the 0 point because snare is often the most important one. And I have that going so that when the snare is hit, all the other drums are in line, so that the sound of the snare drum coming through all the other microphones is perfectly in time. This is how you get that rich, thick snare. It's not with just massive amounts of EQ, it's with the phase aligning correctly so that you're not canceling out all the good frequencies and thickness in that drum. When you're working with just a sine wave, yeah, when it's out of phase a little bit, it basically just adjusts the overall volume. And you're probably thinking, well, okay, I could just push the fader further and who cares? It's louder, I can make up for it, this isn't that important. But realistically, you're never working with just sine waves. You're working with much more complex sounds. And when complex, full range sounds get delayed out of time just a little bit, it gets crazy. So I'm gonna show you here pink noise, where I have two pink noise recordings aligned perfectly, and then I have a sample delay on one of them. So I'm gonna show you on a graph what is happening when you're just barely out of time. All right, let's take a look here. If we just start playing the pink noise, it's basically a relatively flat line from low to high. But if we add, let's just do 1 millisecond, which is effectively like a foot of distance difference between two microphones. Look at that. Look at all the comb filtering that's happening. At all these different intervals, you're getting major cuts in audio. Not only that, but as we change it a little bit, so let's do like 2. Did you hear the change of sound of what you're hearing? Those points move. If you're struggling with drum sounds that sound different on different times or days or weeks, obviously tuning is a huge factor, but this is also making a dramatic difference in the way that your drum sounds. If your microphones get moved and they're no longer in phase, crazy things can happen that will dramatically change the way your drums sound. So I like to use this Auto Align 2 plugin a lot. It's really easy and consistent, but if you're in a live environment or just don't want to spend the money to get this plugin, there's still plenty you can do without it. Look, I'll prove it to you. I'm just gonna turn the auto align plugin off and just put a simple gain plugin on the snare, just snare top. We're gonna solo snare top and snare bottom, and we're just gonna flip the phase of snare top and listen to how big of a difference it makes. So this is the way it was originally recorded with no time alignment, and then I'm gonna hit that phase invert button. That's it, one button. Let's find a different section and listen to that again. This section is gonna be even more obvious because it's just a repetitive snare hit, and I'm just gonna kind of flip back and forth between inverting that phase so you can really hear the difference. I mean, it's not even close. So look, yeah, especially live, it's gonna be difficult to get all these inputs perfectly in time, but there's still things you can do with phase to just make sure, just hit that phase invert button and see if it sounds better with or without it, and that'll get you a huge step in the right direction. So keep in mind, the same idea works for like overheads. So people will often say like, measure the overhead distance to the snare and make sure that it's the same. And that is for this exact reason, so that the phase of them can be coherent. But you also need to make sure that the sound of the snare in the overheads is in phase with the actual snare drum. So I've had situations where I will flip the phase of both the overheads so that they're the same, but they are then flipped to work with the actual snare drum microphone. Some audio engineers like Robert Scoville have even gone so far as to put a speaker like literally inside the snare drum, play pink noise through it, and use that to get all the microphones perfectly in time. That's a lot of effort, but you can't really argue with his results. For those of us that don't want to go tearing apart drums, installing speakers, and using like Smart or something to get everything perfectly in phase, there are some other tools you can use. So as I mentioned, that auto align plugin is great if you're in a post-live studio environment. But for my live audio friends, there's plugins like Waves in Phase that work really well. You basically put the plugin on one signal and then sidechain it to the other signal you're trying to get in phase with, and it will show you what you need to do for time differences to get those to line up. You can also always just multi-track record, throw the tracks into a DAW, and use a plugin like Auto Align and have it tell you what the times need to be to get it better in line. Look, if it sounds good, it's right. That's the rule in audio. That's the only rule in audio. But I hope in this video you've learned a couple of different things you can do when you're not getting the results you're looking for. Phase is one of those things where when it just doesn't feel right, you can just tell something's wrong and you're not getting the sound you should be. A lot of times it has something to do with phase. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos like it, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be building out my first real official studio, and as part of that process, I need to build up my portfolio. If you have a project you need mixed, go ahead and check out the link in the description or just send me an email. I will be offering deeply discounted rates for the next few weeks. All right, see you guys in the next one.